Begin the current Daf Shabbos Daf Kufn and Vav. We begin on the bottom of Kufn and Haim base. We continue the discussion of the previous Daf regarding what's considered gibel. We had mentioned in the previous Mishnah regarding preparing food for animals. One halacha was that you could put water into the bran, but you can't mix it. We continue on the theme of today's Daf. Our share is co-sponsored by Kalzik and Echeskel to anytime Daf Chaim. Some of these we're going to speak about today's Daf are whether different types of animal feed mixture may be needed on Shabbos or not. Statements that were found written in the ledger. Of course, we mentioned one halacha relating to our sugi. We mentioned other halachas that were also found in the pinkas in a ledger of one of the Talmidei Chacham regarding feeding animals on Shabbos and regarding people born on specific days. This we have machlekes amiram whether the Jewish people are influenced by the constellations, and finally we have machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon whether something that is not prepared before Shabbos, if that is muktzah. Some of the important key terms and concepts we're going to have are regarding shinui. If you do a malacha with a change from the normal manner, that's only us from Rabbanan, and therefore sometimes we would be permitted to do something. The machlekes of yesh mazel Yisrael or ein mazel Yisrael. Do the Jewish people consider under constellations? Are they ruled by the laws of mazel or not? And the concept of tzedakah tasimov is that charity saves from death, and the Gemara brings incidents related to that concept. So begin the current daf from the bottom of the Hamed Beis, the penultimate daf in Masechta Shabbos, the second to the last daf. Turn on the brisa. Regarding, again, continuing on this theme, what's considered gibel, the malacha of lush of kneading on Shabbos. So the brisa says like this. The Tanna Kama says, in governess are kali. You're not allowed to mix kali. What's kali? Kali is flour of grain that was dried out and toasted in an oven. That flour will always remain sweet. That's granola that you sweet toasted when it was the grain itself. That's like the Gemara Pesachim calls kamcha davshuna, and they would make the shtis out of it from oil and water and salt that would be mixed together. That would make this type of from this type of flour. So the Tanna Kama says you're not allowed to mix the kali, the toasted grain. The yeshem government, those who say that you could mix it. So it says the Gemara Man Yeshema, who's the yeshem that says you're allowed to mix? Generally, goivel is a problem about lush, about kneading. Who's the one that says permitted? It says the Gemara Rav Chisda, as we continue to have it's Rabbi Yisrael, Rabbi Yehuda. Because as some Girsais have this, our Rashi has it in parentheses. If you would think it's Rebbe, then doing a shinui, as we're going to explain shortly that this heter is only with a shinui, would not work. Because according to Rebbe, the moment we said this machlekes in the previous daf, he says the moment you put in water, you're already liable, even with something that's not kneadable. As we said regarding bran. That's what we said that Tana Vamish is not like Rebbe, it's like Rabbi Yehuda. In contrast, Rabbi Yehuda who says generally by bran, you only chayav until you megabel, until you need it. So you see, you have to do a bona fide kneading to be chayiv. Over here, as we're going to explain, the gibel that they would do, the kneading they would do for this toasted grain was kalachayad indirectly. So therefore, the Gemara says, "V'hanamilahu demeshani." When did we say this heter that you're allowed to mix that this grain is only we do it with a shinui, and therefore there's no isser in doing the gibel? Says Gemara, "Meshani." What's the change? And this is a very common halacha that comes up regarding children's food and these oatmeal. What do you do to mix it? What's the shinui? Rav Chisda says al yad. If you do a little bit at a time, well, then that's something that's going to be permitted if you go ahead and do a little bit at a time. And says the Gemara, the Brisa continues. B'shavan, and both opinions agree. Although there's a machlekes regarding allowed to be magabel the toasted grain, both agree shabaychshin that you could stir, with a spoon, which is essentially the same thing as gleivlin. As a shasis b'Shabbos, shasis is something similar. And the Gemara is going to explain what's the difference. It's flour with it's toasted flour with water. And also another halacha that they agreed to is b'sheisim zeisim hamitzri. What's that? That's a secondary. That's unrelated. It's a related halacha, but not for our sugya. It's a type of a drink that, although it could be medicinal, but people drink it even not for medicinal purposes. And the Mishnah already told us in Avkaf Testament days, any drink that a person would drink for non-medicinal purposes, even though you're doing it for that, it's going to be mutter. So like we say, you're allowed to have a hot glass of tea, even though you're using it for your throat, but you're allowed to drink zeis mitzvah. But the Gemara asks, but Va'amr, the Tanna Kama said, in Gleivlin, you're allowed to mix the toasted grain in the water. How could you then say that everyone agrees that you could stir the shasas on Shabbos? The shasas is the same thing. Says they're slightly different, and that's going to be all the difference. When did we say you can't mix? That's ba'ava, when it's thick. Taking the toasted grain and making a thick mixture, that's a pam batlash according to Tanna Kama. He also not allowed to do him with a shinui. When did we say that everyone agrees you could be boichshin as shasas, you can mix the shasas? That's baracha, when it's liquidy. That's where shasas is going to be permitted, because that's not lisha, that's not considered kneading, because it's a very liquidy mixture. And and that says the Gemara, even the Tanna Kama that says that by shasas you're allowed to mix it, is hud mishani. But that's also, you have to do a shinui there also. It says, what's the shinui you're going to do by the stirring the thin mixture of the shasas? Rabbi Yisri says, because b'chayil, generally during the weekday, how it's normally done is shasas. You first put in the vinegar and then you put in the shasas with it, which is the toasted grain in the water. But b'Shabbos, you have to do it a shinui. First you put in the shasas and then you put in the vinegar again with the shinui. So then it's only rabbinic. And then since you're doing it in this indirect way, so therefore, since it's anyways liquid, it's not really considered so much of a lash. Therefore, then it's going to be permitted. Now the Gemara brings a story related to these halachas. The Levi bereder of Huna bar Chia. Levi, who is the son of Huna bar Chia, Ashkechi legavla de bein Ashkia. He encountered the one in charge of watching his father's animals, where he would knead the food. Kneading is that mixing it to go ahead and feed the food to the animals. And he found him the kogavel that he was kneading, mixing the bran with a shinui, and he was stuffing it to the oxen on Shabbos. So Batishbe, he kicked him because he understood that everyone agrees in our Mishnah. It says that you're not allowed to go. Even though we said in that Mishnah, the leniency of Rabbi Yehuda, that what you could do is that you could put the water into the bran, but everyone agrees you're not allowed to mix the bran. Because even that's Rabbi Yehuda is the more lenient interpretation. All that's usher. He was mixing the bran on Shabbos with the animals. So he kicked him. So Asa Avu Ashkeche, his father came and encountered him and says, Amalei said to him, "Oh, stop! Don't bother him. This is what your mother's father said. Mishmei de Rab, the name of Rab, Umana, and who was his maternal grandfather, is Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba. And he said the name of Rab, that Goivlin, you actually could mix the bran with a shinui, as the Gemara is going to explain, as long as you do a shinui. But like Masafin, one thing you can't do is you can't go ahead and stuff the oxen. Like we said in the Mishnah, Ima Miru, you can't force feed it. But with the Loilokid Balishne, regarding a small calf that is not even accustomed to even eating, then then you could at least force feed him by hand. Now that says the Gemara, when did we say this, that you're allowed to go ahead and be magabel the morsels? We said in the Mishnah, you're not allowed to knead the bran. What's this halacha that was saying in the name of Rav that you're allowed to knead the bran? It's with the Mishani, as long as you do a shinui. And says the Gemara, Mishani, what is the shinui? If you go ahead and you mix it with a shinui, you do crisscross, and this is a practical halacha that comes up for mixing these types of consistencies on Shabbos, so that you go length, and then you go width, and you go length and the width. That's a shinui. And says but the whole Arab Shabbat, but that doesn't mix it well enough. It's not going to help. If you're trying to make that oatmeal for the kid, that farina, it's not mixing well. Says what you can do is menari lekli. What you do is you pour it out into another vessel, and that then gets mixed by itself, and therefore that's going to be a way that you got to do it with a shin. But again, you have to do a shin with the gibel. So again, we essentially had, and this is from the previous stuff too, Rabbi Yehuda held that you could be magabel the mursin. You could mix the bran as long as you do a shinui shaseh ba'arav, like we said, and if you need, you could mix it from bowl to bowl. And regarding magabel and shasas, everyone agrees you're allowed to go ahead and knead the shasas. Why? Ava, if it's thick, so that's where the Tanna Kama says it's going to be aser, which Rabbi Yehuda says you can do a little bit at a time. When it's soft, then everyone agrees, and the normal that you could do it. You just have to change the order. You have to first go ahead and first put in the chaimitz and its shasas, and then put in the chaimitz. So again, you have to do it with a shin, and then you can do these types of things.
Shin here is not
yeah, because there's not full-fledged lush, and then therefore with the shinui, so then it's going to be mut. So the Gemara brings related to the halacha, which starts us in a whole string of halachas. Kasiv and Bekasid de Ziri was written on the ledger of Ziri, which is like these tablets which one are tied to the other, like the stores keepers have ledgers. It was written that he said, Amris Kadim Rebbe, he says, I said in front of my teacher, and says the Gemara, who is his teacher? Reb Chia, that he asked him the following question. Ma'al Megabel, what halacha could you need on Shabbos? Some also says, as we said in the Mishnah, Ein Megabel, not allowed to need, that's a problem about lush. And it says, Ma'al Lefarik, which there's a machlekes Rishonim, Rashi says, Lefarik means to say, to unload, meaning to take the food that's in front of the vessel in this animal, and then to put it in front of another animal. Which Taisa says, how could that be his question? That's a Mishnah we have explicitly on Daf Kuf Mem on the base. So if he brings from the Lefarik means to say, to go ahead and pour out the water and the bran from vessel to vessel, which that will go ahead and mix it very well. And the Aruch gives different interpretation, but Amamutzi says, yeah, that's permitted to be done. Now, the Gemara brings related to that halacha that we're discussing about feeding animals on Shabbos, Amar Rav Menashia, which Rashi points out this is an independent halacha, unrelated to what we were saying before. Chad, one measurement which you usually put in front of one animal, Kamichad, you could put in front of one animal. Meaning to say, on Shabbos you could feed one animal's worth of food. Trey kami trey. You could put two animals worth of feed in front of two different animals that are eating from the same trough. Shabbat, that's going to be okay. But tlasa kami trey. But to put 3 animals worth of food in front of 2 animals, also that's going to be forbidden. Since during the weekday you don't usually put so much. So that's what we learned in the previous stuff. That's a tircha, which is unnecessary, and therefore that would be forbidden. And for sure, putting 2 meals worth in front of 1 animal, that would be forbidden. But it's machlekes. Rabbi Yisrael, he says, kav afil kavayim. You could put even a kav or even 2 kav in front of the person. Ulam, he says even more than that. He says kur afil karayim. So you could put a kur or even 2 kur in front of the person. Now, says the Gemara, once we introduced Pinkasi, which we were talking about the sugi of our topic over here regarding feeding animals on Shabbos, so that gets us into a different discussion. Regarding the Pinkasim, regarding the ledgers. The Gemara brings another Kasav Pinkasi that was found on the ledger of the Levi, which in the ledger, Levi's talking and he's saying, Amris Kadam Rabbi, also similar to Rabbi, he says, I said in front of my teacher, Manu, and who is he? Rabbeinu HaKadosh, that's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, our holy teacher Rabbeinu, which this is also actually related to the sugi that we're talking about. That they would mix the shatisa, which was this toasted grain, with the oil and the water and the salt. They would mix the shatisa in bubble. Rabbi says, my teacher would scream out, well, man, who is that? Like we said, that's Rabbeinu HaKadosh. That people are mixing shatisa on Shabbos, and I'll be goyvel. That's a talada of lush. But no one listened to this. All what Levi wrote in his ledger for him to remember, but no one listened to him. But he says because it was not within the purview of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi to make it forbidden. Why? Because, like we mentioned before, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi, and he permits even by a thick mixture as long as you do a shinoi. And those people were doing like Rabbi Yehuda, so therefore Rabbi did not have the ability to go ahead and protest. Now, this is where we continue with the theme of Kasa Pekase. Now, it says Kasa Pekase written on the ledger of Shimon Levi. A totally unrelated halach. Again, it's just within the theme of Kasa Pekase. Regarding somebody who was born on a Sunday, so now he goes through the mazalis, he goes through the person's mazel based on the day of the week that he's born. If a person was born on the Sunday, he's going to be a complete person in one attribute, but he's not going to have any from a different attribute, which the Gemara is going to shortly explain what does that mean. What does it mean? And not he's not going to have any one other attribute. If you think to say means he's not going to have anything else good about himself. But Rashi says, he says, I was born on Sunday. Rashi obviously is a great person. He didn't have just one good thing about himself. Rather, what are you going to say? No, he's not going to have chad levisha. He's not going to have any other one bad thing for the bad. But you can't say that either. Because Rashi says, not only was he born on Sunday, but Anov bar Karkuz to having bechad b'Shabbat. So we were both born on a Sunday. Anov Melech, I became a Rosh Hashiva. Whoever Rosh Ganavi, he's the head of the thieves. You see the idea is, whoever's born on the Sunday, he becomes the head. Like Sunday is the head of the week, the head of the Ma'aseh Bereishis. But you see that you could have righteous people born or wicked people born. So the interpretation has to be ikuli letuvi, ikuli levishu. It's either going to be totally good or totally bad. You're going to be the head. But I remember when someone told this to me, he says, Shloimy says, he's either going to be this, or I'm not going to say what he said, or he's going to be that. And he's right. This guy's going to end up being like one with the others. And the Gemara brings the gear. So my time, what's the reason? Because on Sunday was light and darkness. We're there, so it's either one or the other. It's like black and white. But Sunday is the first day of the week. Either going to be very great or very bad. So therefore, he was Rosh Hashiva and he was the head of the thieves. Says the Gemara, whoever's born on a Monday, he give a rag. It's going to be a person with a great temper. My time, what's the reason? What happened on Monday? Monday, the waters were separated from Shemayim and Oretz, the heavenly waters and the lower waters. So to this person who has anger, he's divisive. He separates from people. So Monday, which is regarding the separation, is talking about a person with a temper. Whoever's born on a Tuesday, he gave her atter, he's going to be a wealthy person. There's a noyhein, he's going to be an adulterer, Baal Taiva. My time, what's the reason? From the every Be'asav. What was created on Tuesday? Where the grass is the herbage, as the Pasuk says in Bereshit, Tachei Aretz. Now, the grass, Victor Miller always talks about, something that proliferates all over the place. Wherever grass could grow in sidewalks, whatever, it's coming out everywhere. And that's a type of person who, it's a type like preaches, where preaches from the word of paretz, of breaches, which just breaks through everywhere. Guys, whatever type he can get he gets his hands on it. Another interpretation Rashi brings actually, because by the herbage, when the grass, it doesn't say limineu by the grasses, where it didn't come out, like trees come out independently. Grass grows all over, all mixed together. They nourish one from the other. It also, his wife, whatever it is now, it's all over, all mixed tarivas, and therefore, that's going to be a guy who's born on Tuesday. Haiman the Barbabashah, whoever's born on a Wednesday, he's going to be a person that's going to be wise, and he's going to be illuminating. My time, what's the reason? because on Wednesday was when the constellations were hung into Shemayim, and that's Torah because it says Torah Oyer. So that's going to be someone who's wise because he has the Oyer, the light, the illumination, just like the Ma'oris were the constellations were put up on Wednesday. Whoever's born on the Thursday, he's going to be a person who does acts of kindness. What's the reason? Because fish and birds were created on Thursday, and as Rashi explains, it's not difficult to feed them. Rather, how do they get fed? With the kindness of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So you see that Wednesday are creatures that are kindness related, so even though that's Hashem doing kindness to them, but that's a person born on Thursday will be a person who does Gemilas Chesed. Whoever's born on Friday and Erev Shabbos, you give a chazan. He's going to be a person that's always going after doing mitzvahs. As Amr Rav Nachman Yitzchak, he says chazan and mitzvahs, that he's going to be chasing after mitzvahs because that's what you usually do on Erev Shabbos. What are you busy on Friday? You're busy preparing for Shabbos. You're running after mitzvahs, getting to this, getting the challah, getting the wine, getting to this, and preparing the candles, all that. So that's the significance of someone who's born on Friday. Whoever's born on Shabbos, b'Shabbat Yamis is going to die on Shabbos. Why? Because they had to desecrate Shabbos for his birth. So they was going to die on Shabbos. But Amar Rava Bar Rav Shili says, he's going to be called a very holy person. He's going to be a separate, ascetic type of a person, because the pasuk says that you'll sanctify it. So therefore, he's going to be a great and holy person, but he will also die on Shabbos. Now, that was one interpretation which we found in the Pikasei of Rabbi Shloimy Levi. On that, Rabbi Chanina said to the students who are reading this ledger of Rabbi Shua, he says, Puki Amr Le Bar Levi, go out and tell Bar Levi, meaning Rabbi Shloimy Levi, Le Mazel Yom Garm. It's not true. It's not the mazel of the day that causes a person's character. El Mazel Shogarm. It's the mazel of the hour that causes it. As Rashi explains, there are 7 mazalis that go ahead and rule the hours, which is called Chanchal Shatzam. Every one of those letters refers to one of the mazalis that they are a cycle of 7. And the Ches is the Chama, which is the sun, which is one of the mazalis. The Lamed is the Lavana, which is another one of the mazalis. And the rest are all planets, which, as the Gemara explains, depends what hour of the day you're born on. That's what's going to cause. Haiman de Mechama, the one that's born like we're going Chanchal Shatzam. So we're going in that order. The Ches is Chama. Whoever's born under the constellation of the sun, and that's the first one that was put up there. That's why we have Birchas Hacham every 28 years. That's when Hashem put them up, which is 6 p.m. on Tuesday night, which is the beginning of Wednesday, which is why it was put up. That's why every 28 years, back to that same exact place. That's the first planet that's up. Whoever's born in Chama, Yegaber Zivson, will be a person that will illuminate like the sun, which illuminates. Yehei Ochel Midilei, V'Shasim Midilei. He's going to eat from his own stuff. He's going to drink from his own stuff like the sun, which the sun does not go and take off from anyone else's portion. Like this, you never see the sun at nighttime. It only keeps what it has. It eats from its own. It's self-sufficient. So this person will eat from his own, drink from his own. More of the Rezoi Galion. All his secrets will be revealed. Maybe he won't be able to cover over any secret. You know, there's people that they just can't keep a secret. He's not going to be able to because he's like the sun, which is out and open for everyone to see. And in Ganav, if he's going to try to be a thief, he's not going to be successful because he can't be secretive. Whoever's born in the planet of Venus, this is going in the order of Chanchal Shatzim, so after the Ches is the Nun, which is Noiga is Venus. He's going to be wealthy and adulterous type of a person. What's the reason? From this Yalid, Beinura, or the Gears is the Itle Beinura, is because that the fire is by the planet of Venus. There's a fire in that mazel. And the desire of Tashmish burns in that person like a fire, so therefore he's going to be an adulterous type of a person, like the planet Venus has a fire. Whoever's born on the planet, on that mazel, on that hour, because every hour, the way it works with the planets is that they keep on moving through the day, as we had on a different daf. And so therefore when it's by your mazel, that mazel will define your character. So if you're born under in that hour of when Mercury dominates, he's going to be a person that's going to be illuminating and wise. Because this mazel of Mercury is the scribe of the mazel of the sun, where it writes whatever that means. It writes the patterns and the cycle of the sun, and it's always near the sun. So it's like a scribe. So that's generally called the divrei seif and tamid chacham, like scribe. So he's going to be sagacious. Like Koicha, like Mercury. Haman de Levana, whoever's born under the mazel of the moon, Yegever Savel Maran. He's going to be a person who's going to suffer difficulties like the moon, which is always waning. It waxes and wanes, so it's going to be waning. Banai v'sasser, this person is going to build and demolish. Sasser abani is going to demolish and is going to build like the moon, where it constantly gets big, gets small, gets big, gets small. Achal delay, v'shasi delay. He's going to eat from that his own. He's going to drink from that his own, which is like the moon. The moon is masig vul. It takes over from the boundary of the sun, which sometimes you see the moon even during the daytime. And v'ruzay kasim, his secrets will remain covered like the moon, which does not illuminate. And the ganav matzlach, and he's going to try to be a thief. He'll be successful. Says whoever's born under the mazel of Saturn, he's going to be a person that whatever thoughts, plans he has will be nullified. Like Rashi brings a pasuk, lo yish boisu. Lo yish boisu means it will not cease. So shabsoi is from the word of shavas, will stop. So his machshavas will all be batal, will all stop. He'll never be able to follow through on his plans. Or and those that say no, it means the chol the machashim alei betel. Whoever is going to plot against him, their plots will be nullified. Says whoever's born under the mazel of Jupiter, he give it tzadkin, like the name of tzedek, he'll be a righteous person. And he qualifies, he says tzadkin b'mitzvahs, he's going to be righteous in mitzvahs, which generally, as Rashi brings, when we mention mitzvah in Agadic teachings, it means giving charity to the poor people. So whoever's born under the mazel will give a lot of tzedakah. Whoever's born under the mazel of Mars, Yegever Ashadam is going to be a person who spills blood. Now, Rav Ashi is a famous teaching. This is spilling blood, and like any characteristic, any personality trait, and I do a lot of personality typing for people, and people say, oh, my personality, oh, it's the worst one, I'm sure it's the worst one. I go, no personality type is good or bad. It's healthy or unhealthy. Zok to Gemara, Rav Ashi says, this that you're going to be letting blood doesn't mean a bad thing. You might be a bloodletter, which that's a nice profession, it's like a doctor. Ganva, or you might be a thief, a bandit who kills people. Tapchi, you might be a sheikh like my grandfather. Imayil, you might be a mayil. All of them are letting blood, but one's totally righteous, one's middle of the road, and one's wicked. So your personality does not define your future. Now, Amar Rabba, but Rabba wants to disagree. He says, he says, I was born in the Mazel of Madam, I don't kill people. Which Amabai says, no, it's not true. Mar Nami Anish. The master also punishes people that violate what he's saying, but Kotl, he has them killed, meaning as the Dayan. So therefore, you see that it's not true that, yes, if you're born in the mazel, it will affect you. Question is, in what way? Now, relating to this idea about your destined future, Itma we learned, regarding this idea of mazel, there's a whole machlekes regarding if the Jewish people have, quote, mazel, are they under the forces of the constellations or not? Rabbi Chanina Aymar, he says, mazel machkim. First he says that a person's mazel, which the word mazel comes from the shorish of noisel, it's a flow, it's a divine flow that Hashem set up in the planet. It's not like that control. Hashem put that in, just like nature is Hashem controlling that. He made the same thing with the supernatural. Now, so based on a person's mazel is going to be how wise he is. As the Gemara had already just said, that Bacham, if you're born under the constellation of the sun, you'll be very wise and illuminating. Mazel Masha, a person's mazel makes him wealthy. V'yesh mazel Yisrael. And he says also the Jewish people also have mazel, which he holds that prayer and charity will not change your mazel. That's what Hashem destined for you to be, and that's the way you're going to be. Just like your certain height and hair, all those, so does your mazel. Rabbi Yechonam, he disagrees. He says, no, Ein Mazel Yisrael, the Jewish people are not tied down to mazel, which as Rashi explains, through prayer and through merit, a person could change his mazel for the good, like Taisa says. Although the Gemara says that Banei Chaim Zaynei is not dependent on schus, it's dependent on mazel, as the Gemara says, and Aleph, which actually, interesting, I've said this over from Nechemi Karnas and many times at a simcha, the word bacher is Banei Chaim Zaynei Reviche. It's like the Bucher geht werna achusen jetzt, geht werna junger man, we wish him Banei Chaim Zaynei Reviche, which it's totally in mazel, says Taisus, no, you're right. Sometimes the mazel doesn't change, what the Gemara says in the Masechtas Yevamos. But what our Gemara is saying, if you hold Ein Mazel Yisrael, but through a great merit, it could change, and therefore a person could override his mazel. It says Rabbi Shloimy goes according to his reasoning. Because Rabbi Shloimy says, "Menayin Mazel Yisrael." How do you know the Jewish people are not dependent on mazel? Shlomo says the pasuk in Yomי. It says, "Koyam Hashem." So says Hashem, "Al derech hagoyim al talmadu." For the path of the nations of the world, you don't learn. You should not be afraid of the signs of the heaven. Because the nations, they're afraid of that. Says the Gemara, Rabbi says, yeah, they're afraid of the signs because they go by mazel. But Lo Yisrael and not the Jewish people. We're above them. So the Rav also holds a mazel Yisrael. Because Rabbi says, how do you know the Jewish people are not dependent on their mazel? Shlomo says the pasuk in Bereshis, Hashem says to Avram Avinu, it says, he took him outside. What do you mean he took him outside? So Avram left HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because Avram said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, bunch of master of the world. As the pasuk says, Ben Beisi Yerush I see, the person of my household, Eliezer, he's the one who takes care of my household, he's going to inherit me, because I have no children. Hashem says, no. That which is going to come out of your womb. He says in front of Hashem, ask the world. He says, I already looked at my wisdom of astrology. I'm not fit to have a child. Amalei said to him, when it says, he took him outside, go out from your astrology. When it says he took him outside, he says, out of it, there's sagninis. Shein Mazli Yisrael, there's no Mazli Jewish people, where he took him above the constellations. And my daitach, so Hashem explained to me, he says, what do you think? As we continue to this, your problem why you think you can't have a child is because the Kohen said it. Because Jupiter, which is your mazel, is B'mayrav, is in the west, which is a cool place. And therefore it's not fit to conceive. I'm going to move the mazalas. I'm going to move Jupiter to the east, which is a warm place, which gives the ability of conceiving. Vanya said this would mean the pasuk in Yeshaya. Miheir mimizrach tzedek. Who brought up Jupiter from the east, which is usually in the west? HaKadosh Baruch Hu called it to the east. Yikre'eu l'ragli, he called it because of Avram Avinu. So we see that there's no mazel liyisrael. So this is in the Shmuel Nami. We find similarly by Shmuel that in Mazel Yisrael that there's no mazel Jewish people. Why? Because the Shmuel v'Avlik, there's a story of Shmuel and Avlik, which is the name of a non-Jewish sage, who he was a stargazer. How he asked me, they were sitting, there was a certain troop of people going to work in the swamp. So Avlik, the Shmuel Avlik, who was a stargazer, who saw the people's future, he said to Shmuel, hi Gavin, that person, he's going to go, he's not coming back. You know why? A snake's going to bite him, he's going to die. So Shmuel said that Ibar Yisrael, if he's a Jew, he's going to go, he's going to come back because there's no Mazel Yisrael and his prayer is going to help him. They asked when they came back, guess what? That person came back. So Avli got up, he took off that person's package, he found the snake inside, the pasuk that was cut up into two pieces. He was cut up with the pieces of reeds without the guy even knowing about the snake in the back. So Shmuel said to that Yid, what did you do? What merit did you have that saved your life? Amalei said to him, it's interesting. Kol Yoima have a marmin and rifta b'hadeh. Every single day what we do is we put all the bread together in the basket. Every person brings from his house a piece of bread, and we put it into the basket, and then machlinan, and then we all eat together from the same basket. And one person is the one who goes around and collects the bread from everyone for the communal lunch. Today, what happened was, there was one of us, he didn't have any bread to put into the basket. He was embarrassed. So I said to everyone else, you know what? I'm going to go and collect the bread today. And I'm going to put it in. When I came to that person, I made believe, I made it look like I was taking from him, but I really put in my own piece of bread. That the person shouldn't be embarrassed. He said to him, you did a mitzvah. Navik Shmuel went out and he expounded, he clapped on the beam, he quoted the pasuk in Mishlei. It says, "V'tzedakah tatzimah," his charity saves from death. Now says Shmuel, I want you to understand. When it says saving from death, it doesn't just mean a horrible death. That's a disgraceful type of death, but you're going to die. No, it saves you literally from death itself, and it gives you longer life. Where this person was saved, he survived the snake attack because of the tzedakah that he did that day with that person. So to say the more second narrative. Rabbi Kiva from Rabbi Kiva was about Ein Mazel Yisrael. Because Rabbi Kiva Brati had a daughter, Amalei Kaldoi, the stargazers told him, the day you're going to bring her to the bridal canopy. The day of our chuppah, Tark lechiv yamisa, a snake's going to bite her, she's going to die. So he was very worried. Well, although you're not supposed to ask by this, but if you hear this, you're allowed to believe it, so he's worried. That day of the chuppah, she took she had a clasp of gold, which was a brooch, which had a point at the end, and that's the beguda. She took it out, her jewelry, she didn't have, let's say, a dress, so she stuck it into the wall. Isrami esev be'eini dechivya. What happened was, it went into the eye of a snake. She had no clue, she just stuck it into the wall. When she was taking out her brooch, now the snake was stuck into the pin of the brooch, and she was pulling it out, and guess what comes out of the wall with it? Is a snake. Our father said to Tachtel, my Abdu, what did you do? She said to me, no, it's interesting, Papania, last night, there was a poor person banging on the door. It was busy with the vorspiel, it was busy getting ready for the chasna, but no one heard the poor person banging on the door. So I got up, I took my portion that I was given by the meal, and I gave it to him. He said to mitzvah, you did a mitzvah of charity? Rabbi Kiva went out and he expounded with tzedakah tatzma mavis. Now what's important is that he always knew the pasuk, but sometimes when you go through something in life, you suddenly realize the depth and and the intensity of that idea, and he goes, so Dafka Taz Mavis, but let me say not only from a deviant type of death, rather from death itself. The Gemara brings one final narrative on this idea. We find that Imazli Yisrael, where when a person does sukkah, it could change it, and it could actually change his destiny. The mother of Nachman Yitzchak, Amr Kaldoi, the stargazer, said to the mama, Baruch Kanav Berich Kanavahava, your son's going to be a thief. So what'd she do? L'shavakti Gilui Reisha, she never let him go with his head uncovered. And Amr she said to him, Kisei Reishach, cover your head. And that's actually, people don't know this, Yarmalka is from the word of Yari Malka. It's that you're afraid, and that's what the kisei, the kippah, it's a covering, it's a dome, it covers your head to know that there's something on top of you. So cover your head. You should always have the fear of heaven on you. You should always beseech mercy that the Yitzhar should not rule over you. Now, the son never knew what his mother was telling him. Well, Mama, take it easy, right? But one day, Yosef Kogoris Tusidikli, he was sitting and learning underneath a tree. So there's a big Tamachachim, whatever. But his kerchief, which was his yarmulke, fell off of his head. Dali Ene, he lifted up his eyes. Chazal Dikli, he saw the palm tree. Am Yitzri, his inclination got the better of him. Solik, he got up. Paskili Kivura, he detached a cluster of dates, Bishini with his teeth. And it wasn't his own tree. So you see that really his mazel was a ganav, a gazlan. But because in Mazel Yisrael, the fact that they davened and the mama's sharing and that he davened and that his head was covered, that overrode his mazel. And you see the one time his yarmulke came off, he went and he grabbed with his teeth something that wasn't his. So again, you see that in Mazel Yisrael. We're continuing the next Mishnah continues on the theme of our previous Mishnahs regarding feeding an animal on Shabbos. So we have what's a classic machlekes of Shimon and Yehuda regarding what's considered muktzah on Shabbos. It says the Mishnah, and you could cut gourds, which are already detached, but generally, the gourds are not meant for animals to eat. Generally, pumpkin gourds, if a human could eat it, you don't feed it to the dogs. You'll eat it yourself. If you can't, then suddenly they go to the water and they feed it to the birds. But anything that's edible, you're not giving to the animals. Now that's the chiddush that we'll see, that according to Shimon, even so, it's not going to be muktzah to give it to a dog or an animal, where generally that's considered muktzah for them, because it's not utility. No, you could cut the gourds and put it lifnei and give it in front of the animals. It's not considered muktzah in that context. Sutavas Navela, which that's a more understandable case, a dead animal that became an avela today. Now, Bein HaShmashos, when Shabbos was starting, which is what evaluates it as a status of prepared, which is called muchen or muktzah, or set aside, not prepared for Shabbos, you were going to use it for a person, right? A regular animal, you're not giving it to the dogs. Is kushene fleish versus treifa fleish, you can't compare the money, right? You're not going to give it to the dogs. But even so, even though it became the avela on Shabbos and it wasn't prepared for dogs from before Shabbos, you could cut it up and give it and put it lifnei club in front of the dogs. That's Reb Shimon, because Reb Shimon does not hold that considered muktzah. Yehuda, he holds no. If it was not a carcass from before Shabbos, asur is going to be forbidden. It's not considered prepared. This is the ultimate machlekes of Yehuda and Reb Shimon regarding what's considered muktzah not. Now, in we learned regarding this machlekes Yehuda and Reb Shimon, oral shachas simon. Oral is three opinions that are like Reb Yehuda, and shachas are three opinions that hold like Reb Shimon regarding these halachas of muktzah. Which oral is the first one. The ayin is ula. Amar ula. Ula says halacha Reb Yehuda. Halacha is like Reb Yehuda. Now the parentheses says not that the girsa, but it's Mishmulam Halach Reb Shimon because we're going to quote him shortly. He holds like Reb Shimon that does not hold of muktzah. Now, what's the reish of oral? He also holds like Reb Yehuda. How do we know this? Medikarchim, we brought this opinion earlier in this Masechta from the fact that the mats which are made to zuzi, zuzi means in Aramaic boats. The mats that are made for boats, which is to cover all the merchandise on the boats. The Rav says it's forbidden to move those mats. Shmuel says permitted. So you see the Rav holds like Reb Yehuda. And what's the lamed of the oral? Levi also has like Reb Yehuda. Where do we find this? Kihad the Levi, like we find by Levi, when they would bring an animal that developed what's a doubt if it's a treifa or not, and they needed the ruling of the sage to say if it's a treifa or not. Now, a yom to be allowed to shecht an animal, but if it's a treifa, it doesn't have a eichel nefesh purpose. So we bring in front of him, is this treifa or is it not? Well, have a chazla, he would not look at it to analyze if it's a treifa or not, if it has a mortal defect, only for sitting by the garbage dump. Because so if he sees that it's a treifa, he'll just leave it over there. Because Dama he would say, maybe it's not going to be kosher. And even for dogs, it's not going to be valid because when it's slaughtered today, it's considered prepared for a person, not for an animal. And then you can't move it according to Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore you see that Levi also held like Rabbi Yehuda. That was just three held like Rabbi Yehuda. Then we have Shachaz Asimin, the three Amorim that held like Reb Shimon. Shmuel Amar, he says Alach Reb Shimon. And the Zayin Vav Zeir Sab Alach Reb Shimon. Where do we find Zeir saying like Reb Shimon? Because now we learned the Mishnah in Masechtes Bein that says Behema Shemesa, regarding an animal that died, Lo Yizazenim Imkaima. So it says you shouldn't move it from its place. Now, the Tig Mazib Zeir Masechtes Bein, he translate, what does this mean? Behema is Kadishim. Specifically if it's an animal of Kadshim. Where Kadshim, once it's dead, you can't have any benefit from whatsoever. It's not even fit for dogs, no matter when it would die. Because you can't feed Kadshim, in Machil and Kadshim, Leklovim. So that's where we're saying you can't move it. Al B'chulin, but it sounds like, but if it was unconsecrated animals, Shabbat then you would be able to move it and feed it to the dogs. Because like Reb Shimon, that's not considered a muktzah. And also, the ches is Va'af Reb Yechon and Omahalach Reb Shimon. That's what he said. Now, says the Gemara, Reb Yechon really say this? But Rabbi Shloimy said, "Allah, you stop Mishnah. Allah is like an anonymous Mishnah." But now we're doing Mishnah Masechtas Beis that says you can come to Zayin and Aleph. You can't chop wood from the bundle of beams that you had set aside, which were generally used for construction. Neither can you use even an old beam, which broke on Yom Tov, which broke today, because it's only right now that you're going to start using it as fuel. But even though now it's usable for fuel, but it's going to be awesome because Bein Hashmashas, it was not prepared for that because it was a beam for construction. So you see that's Stam Mishnah, which is obviously like Rabbi Yehuda. So how could you say halacha like Rabbi Shimon? Rabbi Yehuda always hold halacha like Stam Mishnah. That Stam Mishnah Masechtas Beis is obviously telling you that if it wasn't prepared, which is similar to halacha by Mishnah, that's going to be muktzah. So the Gemara, Rabbi Yechon, you're right. Who that Mishnah could be Rabbi Yehuda Masmala. He learns it that it's not a Stam Mishnah. He learns it that we know who that opinion is. Rabbi Yehuda. And if it's like a Das Yachin, you don't have to say like that. And therefore, halacha is going to be he could have ruled not like that Mishnah and say like Rabbi Shimon. Some of these we discussed in today's Daf in Shabbos Daf Kuf Nun Vav, second to the last Daf in Masechtas Shabbos. We had a machlokes if you're allowed to knead the toasted grain. According to Rabbi Yehuda, who we said in general, he says you're not chayav for kneading until you actually knead it together. So he's more lenient than Rebbe, the way at least our Gesaos in the parentheses have in Rashi. So then it would be permitted if you do at least with a shinoi. What's the shinoi? That's all yada yada. You do a little at a time. That's going to be permitted. Which the Tanakh says no, even that you can't do. But the Shavim, what they do both agree you could do is you could mix the shasas. So the Gemara wonders, shas is the same thing. It's toasted grain also. No, the difference is that is a liquidy type of mixture. Liquid type mixture is not really so much lash. And additionally, you have to do with a shinoi. What's the shinoi? Is you first put in the shasas, which is that mixture with the grain and the water, and then you put in the vinegar, which was this drink that would make. So since you're doing it indirect way and it's really liquidy, so then everyone would agree that's permitted to be done on Shabbos. So then we said that you're allowed to go ahead and knead, they would be matter to knead the mursin with a shinoi, which is, if you do it shasav erev, you do crisscross. You don't do the regular type of mixing, you do one length and then the width, and either doesn't mix it so well. Well, okay, what you could do is you could pour it from bowl to bowl, and then that would mix the bran. And that brought into a whole discussion of kasav and bekase when we found written on someone's ledger, which we have a machlekes. How much food can you put in front of how many animals together at the same time? Is it only one in front of one, two in front of two, or is it even as you can put as much as you want in front of the animals? Not a problem. The second ledger we had was that people used to mix the shatisa in Bavel, and Rebbe didn't like that, but he couldn't protest because that was going like Rabbi Yehuda, who, as we said, holds even by a thick mixture, as long as you're doing a shinoi, that's a permitted way of mixing on Shabbos. The next ledger we found was from Yeshua Levi, that he says that the mazel is dependent on the day that you're born, which there were those who wanted to disagree and say, no, it's not in the day that you're born, but it's in the hour that you're born, which related to the mazel that rules in that hour, which there's 7 hours that the day goes through, and the mazals keep on changing by the hour, which is Shat Simchanchal. Each one refers to a different one. There's the Chama, is the Ches, and the Lavan is the Lamed, and the Kof is Koichav, and the Nun is Noigad, all the different types of mazalas that makes. And one of them is a famous one, which is Madim Madim, whoever's born under the mazel of Mars, so he's going to be a person who spills blood. But again, that's not good or bad. It's just going to be, you could either be a bloodletter, you could be a thief, you could be a butcher, you could be a mile, all of them are letting blood. Then we had a machlekes if there's what's called Mazel Yisrael. So those who hold that there's no Mazel Yisrael, because Avram Avinu was told, which, and we find the story with Shmuel and Avlet, and we have the daughter of Rebbe Kiva, where we find that Stakar Ta'atzim Mabis literally, and we see Ein Mazel Yisrael. And so the Rebbe Nachman Yitzchak, where his head was covered, and again that saved him with the Emas of the Shmaya, where even though his Mazel was to be a thief, he never ended up being that. Then we went to the next Mishnah, we had machlekes if you're allowed to cut up cords and the vela on Shabbos, which machlekes is Yehuda and Reb Shimon, if that's considered muktzah or not. ultimately wasn't the period or not, which we had a siman, oral shachas, which was a machlekes of the halacha is going to be like a Yehuda, which that was oral, or like a Shimon, which that was shachas. We find those three that say like a Yehuda, which is the oral, which is the, which that was the siman, that's the iri, that was the oral. Rav says we find his halacha by the mats of the boats. We found in the previous daf that he says that's muktzah, that's like a Yehuda. Levi, he would only check the treifis on top of the garbage dumps because he didn't want to touch it, because you see in the vela is muktzah like a Yehuda. And Ziri, which he said that an animal that died, you're not allowed to move it, only if, actually that's like Reb Shimon, right? That he said that you're not allowed, that was like Reb Shimon, that he says that you're not allowed to move it, that we said he's only by behem of kadshim, that was like Reb Shimon. Reb Yechanan also says that like Reb Shimon, but then the difficulty was, what do you mean? You have a Stam Mishnah that says like Reb Yehuda, a Mishnah Masechtas Beya. So in that Gemara, which says Imavak and Curries, you can't chop the things because even though now it broke, but what do you mean? So what's the difference? So that's the Gemara that he says like Reb Yehuda, and it wasn't a Stam Mishnah, therefore it wasn't difficult why he was able to rule. Like Reb Shimon, thank you for any time for hosting us.